We're learning the Sicha on Parshas Re'eh, the first Sicha in Chelek Chav Daled, on page 79. The shir today is being learned L'Nishmas Rabbi Yosef ben Yamin ben Rabbi Menashe Koltman. Wegen dem Chiyuv, as man soll bringen und makriv sein Karbonis blois in Beis Hamikdash Dafke. Regarding the obligation that Karbonis must be brought specifically in the Beis Hamikdash and in no other location. Und the Isa Akrave mechutz leMikdash. And there's an Isser to bring any Karbonis outside of the Beis Hamikdash. Was retzich beParshaseinu, which is spoken about in the Psukim of this week's Parsha. Wer nois gerechnet in Mishnah, weil derech sein sefri de shlaben shabazeh. So in the Mishnah, it enumerates the various different stages regarding this. And it says as follows: Mishahukam Mishkan Nesr Habamis. When the Mishkan was put up, and that's when the Yidden was still in the Midbar, so they weren't allowed to build any bama, which is any mizbeach that you build in any other location, to bring a carbon there. Then, when they came into Eretz Yisrael, Bo Gilgal, and then they put up the Mishkan in the city of Gilgal. That was for 14 years. Hutra Bamis. During that time period, there was a heter to bring karbonis on a bama anywhere. Then Bo Shilai. When they came to Shilai and they put up a Mishkan there, which was actually built, as we'll see later, from stone walls, and the covering was with the yiriyos from the Mishkan that they had in the Midbar. And that Mishkan in Shilai stood for 369 years, as the Rabbi brings later. So in this time period, Nesr Habamis, they weren't allowed to have any other bamis. Well, right here, the Rambam himself, or this is actually quoting from the Mishnah says that it did not have a proper roof, but it was a structure made out of stone. Vihi hoisa menucha. And this place, it was what's called menucha. It's the Shechina rested there for many, many years. Then, after this Mishkan was destroyed, Baal and Noiv v'Givain. Then they were in Noiv and Givain for, in total, 57 years, as the Rebbe brings later in one of the Oster of the Sicha. So, Hutra Bamas. During that time period, they were also allowed to bring a carbon on a bama. Then, Yerushalayim, when Yidden finally came to Yerushalayim, Nesru Habamais. So from this time forward, there was no bama allowed. And there wasn't any more a heter for a bama. V'hi hoisa nachla. And Yerushalayim is a nachla, an everlasting inheritance, where the karbanis always have to be brought. This is the Mishnah. Now, he says, move on, Milashana Mishnah. It's understood from the language the Mishnah says, as the inyan from Baal is Shilai, Nesr Habamais, that when they came to Shilai and they weren't allowed to bring a carbon on a bama, if abundin, the mid was darkness given abayis avanim v'hiyois menucha. Says the Mishnah itself describes, and it's sort of a reason that it's because it was more permanent. It was an actual proper house, a proper structure of stone. And as the Mishnah there says, it's menucha. It was more restful. Mashenkem begilgal of Neze was damals aufgestellt im oil mayit. In Gilgal, for 14 years, the Yidden put up the same Mishkan that there was in the Midbar. Und wie der Lashon Rambam nikra shiloi bayis. The Rambam brings this in Pirush HaMishnayos. The Rambam also describes that what the mailet that there is in Shiloi is the fact that it's called a bayis. Davon verstehen. So the question here is, es steht mefurish im Pasuk. There's a clear Pasuk that says, Ki lo yashafti bebayis. The Hebrew says, I have not dwelled in a home. From when I took Yidden out of Mitzrayim until this day. And I'm just wandering around together with the Yidden in a tent and in a Mishkan. Now, this refers to the Mishkan the Yidden were had in the Midbar, in Gilgal, in Shiloi, or even in Noiv and Givain. And this is a pasuk that says that das heißt, as euch der Mishkan Shiloi wird nicht gerechnet wie a Beis. It's not considered to be a home. No blois als oil, it's just a tent. Or the Mishkan, or the meaning of the word Mishkan, which is similar to oil, but not a bias. So how could the Mishnah and the Rambam say that the Maila of Mishkan Shiloh is the fact that it's a bias? And that's why in that time period, there was an issa of bringing a carbon on any bama. The Pashtus kemen sagen, so simply we can say, as es venzich legabi was meret, that whether to refer to it as a bias or an oil, it depends in relation to what. Legabi dem oil mayed, dem Mishkan vet shili gerechnet als bias. Comparing it to the Mishkan So this is referred to as a bias. And the reason is because the Mishkan was made from a completely temporary structure. It was all made from the Kroshim and from the Yiriyos, which they assembled and disassembled. So it was all made l'chatchil in such a way that it's not permanent. But over here, this was a structure that was permanent as far as the walls are concerned. There was walls made out of avonim, of stone. So in relevance or in comparing it to the Mishkan, it's a bias. But comparing it to the structure of the Beis HaMikdash that was built in Yerushalayim, and that was built a much larger structure with a proper roof and so on, is this blaze and oil. So therefore this is only considered to be a temporary structure, it's a tent. So basically, Pashat Begashmius, the Mishkan in Shiloi, or the bias in Shiloi, is sort of in between. It's to some degree a temporary structure because it didn't have a proper roof, but on the other hand, it's a permanent structure because it had a proper wall of stone. So it depends what you compare it to. Now, this answer the Rebbe says here, the Achrayim say this. Now, however, the Rebbe says there's an additional point here that we must add. Because from them, was verbindos, mitadin misuyim, iser abamis, from this that you see here in the Mishnah, that the fact that Mishkan Shiloi is a bias is not just considered to be a bias because of a certain aspect of its mitzias, of its structure, relative to something else, but rather the Mishnah says that there's a specific din that comes out of this, that it's called a bias. The Isser of Bamos during that time period is mashma, it seems, as oich in Mishkan Shiloi is faran a gather from bias. That in Mishkan Shiloi as well, it is defined al pi halacha as being a bias. Not just bias, begashmius, relative to something else because of a certain permanence in its structure that it physically had. But al pi halacha, it is defined to some extent as a bias. Was the far he haisa menucha, and therefore, as the Mishnah says, when the pasuk says menucha, that's what it refers to. Mishkan Shiloi. Menucha means a certain permanence, a gather of a bias. So what's the pshat in this? What is this gather of bias? Not just the relative aspect of bias begashmius that it has, but also the gather of bias, al pi halacha, that the Mishkan Shiloi has. So the explanation for this is as follows: We gefind in Torah demselben Lashon by Shiloi und dem Beis HaMikdash b'Yerushalayim. So first of all, we see in Torah in one pasuk where it says the same expression both regarding Shiloi and Yerushalayim. The place that Hashem chose. Steht in Sifri. So the Sifri tells us, what is this place Hashem chose? Zu Shiloi u Beis Elavim. It refers to both the place where Shiloi was and also Beis Elavim, where the Beis HaMikdash is in Yerushalayim. Was das gefindt man nit benegei the Mishkan Frier. This expression that it's a place that Hashem chose, we don't find such expression regarding the Mishkan earlier. That's when it was in Gilgal or when the Yidden were in the Midbar. And we don't even find this regarding the Mikdash that was built even after in the cities Noiv and Givon. And the difference between the Mishkan and Shiloi and the other places where the Mishkan or the Mikdash was is understood. When the Mishkan is gestanden b'Midbar, when the Mishkan was then in the Midbar, Chach oich demot is Nesra Bamis. Even though in that time the Isser of Bamis did apply. But gedacht Makav and the Karbanis now Mishkan, all Karbanis had to be brought only in the Mishkan. Is this aber nicht gewend der Makaim asher yivcha Hashem? But you can't say that that is connected to the fact that the Mishkan was a chosen place, that the Eibishter says, bring Karbanis only here. Warum ist es doch nicht gestanden auf ein Ort? Nor gegangen mi Masa la Masa. The Mishkan was not in one location, and that was built and stayed there. They traveled around with the Mishkan from one location to another in the Midbar. Upshita, and definitely it's obvious, as Mekendis Nitzagim and Aged, the Yud Dalet Shanim Shekavshu V'cholku. Most definitely, when the Mishkan was in the Gilgal for 14 years, which was the 14 years that the Yidden were conquering Eretz Yisrael and then divided Eretz Yisrael, during that time period, definitely you can't say that this is a place where the Eibusher chose Asher Yivcha Hashem. When the Mishkan is given in Gilgal, then es ist nicht given the Metzias from Machnes. There wasn't even a proper setup of the Machnes of Klal Yisrael to divide it as Machne Leviah, Machne Yisrael, and so on. The Machnes weren't even set up for Klal, which that's even less than when Yidden were in the Midbar with the Mishkan. When Yidden were in the Mishkan in the Midbar with the Mishkan, that is, so there was a Metzias of Machnes. When they camp properly in the proper formation as it's described in the Psukim. Over here, when they were in Gilgal, the Yidden were still in the middle of figuring out where they're going to be living and conquering and dividing the territory. So definitely in that time period, it's not a permanent place where Hashem chose. But then, when the Yidden come to Shiloh, was dort ist Chal die Hagdore von Hamokim Ashivcha Hashem. Here, this is a place that could be defined that Hashem chooses this place. This is Given Hamokim Kavua Oif Shin Samech Tes Shana. And this became a permanent place for Yidden for a very long period of time, 369 years. Obemele is Bisman Shiloh Given de Isser zu Makriv sein an another art Nuchutz leMishkan Shiloh. So this is the reason why, during this time, the Isser of bringing Karbonis in another place, on a Bama, applies. Because as a result of the Bechira of the Eibishter in this place. So the Yidden are not just temporarily happen to be, they sort of set up shop, they put up a Mishkan in this place for the time being. But no, this is a place where Hashem chose. Und der Rebbe hat man dort aufgestellt a Bayis shel Avonim. And this is the reason why they put up a proper structure made out of stone. Und wird angerufen Bayis, and it's referred to as a Bayis, as the Mishnah says. Warum das liegt euch an Inyan von Kviyas Makim? Because this expresses the fact that we're establishing a permanent place that the Eibush is choosing, that the Eibush chose. Okay, so in this sense, Yerushalayim and Shiloh are the same. And that's why the Mishkan in Shiloh has a gather of a bias. It's called Menucha, and it's a real bias. But it's still not 100% permanent, and therefore there is a pasuk that says that it's called an oil or a Mishkan, as the Rebbe brought before. And as we'll see in the continuation of the Sikha, the Rebbe will explain the difference between Shiloh and Yerushalayim. Al pizei yesh levaye dem chiluk in di limudim b'negeya zu heter abamis k'shenichnesu la'aretz v'mba'ol leGilgal. We can now understand the difference between the source, from where we learn out the heter of bringing a carbon on a bama in the time period. As soon as Yidden came into Eretz Yisrael, when they were 14 years in Gilgal, und heter abamis nachdem was charav Shiloh umbal and Givai. And then many years later, after Shiloh was destroyed, and the Yidden had the Mikdash in Noiv and Givai. So these are two time periods that there was a heter for bamas. But as we'll see, based on the source of the heter of the Bama, when they were there 14 years in Gilgal, and the heter of the Bama in the 57 years when they were in Noiv and Givain, is not the same kind of a heter. Ubelashna Rambam, we can understand this from what the Rambam says in the Pirush HaMishnayos. Lefi shemiyoyim shepasko hamachnes v'nichnesu la'aretz cholo. From the day that Eden did not have any more the formation of the camps, the way they camped in the Midbar, and they entered into Eretz Yisrael. This is the time period when they came to Gilgal. Nistalka mitzvahs loisese, this mitzvahs loisese of not bringing a carbon outside the Beis HaMikdash was completely removed. V'nishar mutter, and it remained. It was automatically allowed. Shekol misharoitze lahakriv bama makriv k'moi shehoya koydem hamishkan. So anyone that wanted could bring a carbon anywhere on a bama like it was before the Mishkan, even in the Midbar, was originally put up. So the whole situation reverted back to the way it was in the beginning, where the whole Isser does not apply because of the reality on the ground. The Mitzias, there's no Indian of not bringing a carbon in any other place. So the Rebbe explains, what we see from the words of the Rambam is that heter akrove is b'derech memela. The fact that at this time you are allowed to bring a carbon anywhere is an automatic result of the facts. Wie bald is nitoke machnes, und es Punkt wie früher fara kamas hamishkan. There's no machne. So therefore, you can bring a carbon wherever you want. When you look there in the Psukim, so the basis of what the Rebbe is saying here is the Psukim in Parshas Achrei, where it speaks about the Isser of Shchutei Chutz, bringing a carbon outside the Beis HaMikdash. So it's all based on the fact that there's a certain machne, and there's the machne Leviyah, and then there's the machne Shchine, and the carbon has to be brought where the machne Shchine is, on the Mizbeach, and not outside where machne Yisrael is, or in any other place. So the whole concept and the Isser of Shchutei Chutz only applies when there's a mitzias of machnes. If there's no machnes, like when Yidden were in Gilgal and they were still busy conquering and setting up things in Eretz Yisrael to divide the territory, so there's no concept of any isser of bringing a carbon outside the Mishkan in Gilgal. That's the reason for the heter at this time period. But when it comes to the heter, for bringing a carbon on a bomb after Mishkan Shiloh was destroyed, as we see in the Gemara, there's a special pasuk that's the source for the heter. We learn this up from the pasuk. We learn it from the pasuk, which is also in this week's parsha. Ki loy basem adata el hamenucha ve'el hanachla. You haven't yet arrived to the place of rest and the place of inheritance. El hamenucha zu shilai. The term menucha refers to shilai, and nachla zu Yerushalayim. And nachla refers to Yerushalayim. Now, lama chilka and akasif. Why is the Torah dividing menucha and nachla separately? Kedei litein heter ben zeh lezeh. To teach you that between Shiloi and Yerushalayim, there is a special heter granted to bring a carbon in any place. So the point is, this is not an automatic heter just because of the mitzias, because of the facts. Medarf haben a heter miyuchadiv then. As you see here, you need a special pasuk to divide Shiloi from Yerushalayim, and that in between there's a heter to bring the carbon on the bama. Okay, so now what's the reason for this? So here, the Rebbe takes this a step further, because you may think that the reason why you need now a special heter is because at this time period, Yidden already finished dividing Eretz Yisrael, and they were already set up properly with machnois. So even when they had the Mikdash and Noiv and Givai, which is the time period between Shiloi and Yerushalayim, so because there's machnois, the isser of bringing a carbon chutz la machne shchine should apply. Maybe that's why you need a special heter here. Here the Rebbe continues and says that that's not the reason for this, that's not at least the only reason for the heter, why you need a special heter, but rather there's another reason here. And that goes back to the reason because Shiloi was already a permanent bias. Let's see. On an additional point here, this is mashma from the Mlosh, litin heter ben zeh lezeh, the language that's used here in the Gemara, that there's a special heter between Shiloi and the Beis Hamikdash in Yerushalayim. So we're sort of saying that these two are sort of the same, but then there's in between. That's the lashon here. So what do we see from this? Is the Gesal Kedaitach, or maybe it should be read as the Gesal Kedaitach, so Aser and Bamis, that the thought to say that in this time period between Shiloi and Yerushalayim, that even then there should still be a Issa to bring a carbon on a bama, was the limud is shaylo, and that's what this pasuk here is coming to say, that it's not so and there is a heter. Why? Why would I think that there's a heter in this time period? Is nit weil der Mishkan is given b'noive givoin and as a given machnes. It's not because in this time period when the Mishkan was in, or the Mishkan or Mikdash was in noive givoin, there was already proper machnes, and therefore the Isser should have applied. No, rather, the reason is because he would have thought, as Mishabal is Shiloi, is Batal Gevarin, Klolis in Yanabamas. The entire concept of a Bama, that there could be any place you could bring a carbon, that whole entire concept is totally nullified. But why? Because once they came to Shiloi, similar to Yerushalayim, where the Eibusher chooses the place, so it becomes completely, that this is the only place, this is what's chosen now. Maybe the Rebbe will conclude this soon, as we'll see in the Hemshel. I'm just spelling it out over here now, so it should be clear. That the point is, why is Klolis Inyan Abama bottle? Not only because right now there are machnois, so the Isser of Bamais Bimitzias applies. And when there's no machnois, so then the Isser will not apply. No. Once the Eibusher chooses a place, that's it. There's no concept of bringing a carbon on a Bama anymore. Und der Ruf is the pasuk mechadish git a heter bein zeh lezeh, and that's what the pasuk here is saying, that nevertheless there is a heter bein zeh lezeh. So again, the Rebbe's diak here is from the term bein, a heter of bein zeh lezeh, that Shiloi and Yerushalayim are be'em is similar, and then there's in between that nevertheless there's a special heter. On a zayich moving from lashon Rashi b'pirushay al hashas, the same we could understand from the way Rashi puts it, when Rashi explains this there in the Gemara. So Rashi says, what do we need a special pasuk for? For the heter of Bamis in this time period. Achar kedushas Shiloi mishacharva. After the kedusha of Shiloi, and when Shiloh was destroyed. In other words, what you see in the lashon of Rashi was that there would be a reason to say that it's because of Shiloi that there should not be a heter now. Even after Shiloi is destroyed, but once Mishkan Shiloi was built and there was the choice that the Eibusher chose Shiloi, so then even after it's destroyed, it shouldn't change. There should be no heter of Bamis, and that's why you need a special pasuk. So here the Rebbe explains the point. As Mishabal is Shiloi is in ganzen Bata geworden Inyan Bamis. Why should you say that once they arrive to Shiloi, the entire concept of bringing a carbon in another place besides the designated place should be bottled, and there's no concept of a Bama anymore? regardless of whether there is a machna or isn't machna. It's nothing to do with that. But the whole concept of bamis is bottle. Now the fun is muchach. So again, from here it's clear that the reason is as in Shiloi at sich aufgetan an inyan from kviyas mokim, because what was accomplished in Shiloi is that this place was designated permanently. Was is free it given. This was never before, and this is the hamakim asher yivcha Hashem, the place that the Eibusha chose. Hatas mevatel given the minyan abamis. So the fact that the Eibusha chooses this place, there's a bchira in the makim, that's mevatel the concept of any bama. Nor denach is gekommen a limud miyuchad litin had to be zelazeh. But then afterwards, once Shiloi was destroyed, so now there's a special heter to say that there's a new heter for the bama. Even though there was a choice in Mishkan Shiloi, but nevertheless, now there's a heter that's learned out that after the churban of Shiloi, you could bring a carbon there. Okay, so far the Nakud over here is, we see from the Sifri that both Shiloi and Yerushalayim are learned from the same pasuk, that it's a Mokim Ashivcha Hashem. But there has to be a difference between Shiloi and Yerushalayim. But we need to understand here. If regarding Shiloi, just like Yerushalayim, it says Amakim Ashivcha Hashem, this is the place. Favas vert dafke the Beis Hamikdash of Yerushalayim angerufen Beis HaBechira und nicht der Mishkan Shebishiloi. So why is Beis HaBechira only referred to when we're talking about the Beis Hamikdash in Yerushalayim, and Mishkan Shiloi is not referred to as Beis HaBechira? Why is that so? There's a Bechira in the Makim of Mishkan Shiloi, and there's a Bechira in the Makim Yerushalayim. According to the Sifri, it goes into the very same pasuk. So we must say, As Shiloi vert angerufen Makim asher yivcha Hashem. Yes, it's true that Shiloi is also, there's a Bechira for the Eibusha in this place. Is aber faran a chiluk in the Bechira zwischen Shiloi and Yerushalayim. But nevertheless, there's a difference in the nature of the choice of the Eibusha, that he chooses the place of Shiloi and Yerushalayim. Here the Rebbe will explain by Riches what this difference is. Or the Chiluke Halashainis Beparsha Seinu Beneged Mchiva Karbonis Hahakrava Bebayis. There's the different languages that the pasuk uses when it comes to the chiyuv to bring the carbon dafke in this place which is designated for the carbon. There are two different sets of psukim that discuss this regarding Shiloi, and psukim that discuss this regarding Yerushalayim. Frier steht in pasuk. So earlier on in this week's parasha, the pasuk says, "Leisasan kein laHashem alekechem." Do not do so for Hashem. What's thus made, what it's referring to is Kepirish Rashi lahakter l'shamayim b'chol mokim, to bring a carbon for the Eibusher anywhere, just wherever you want. Ki im el hamokim asher yivcha Hashem alekechem gomer, or maybe Hashem alekecha l'shichnoi tidrishu uvas hashama v'haveisem shama elisechem. That's where you bring your karbanis. That's what the psukim say in the beginning. Then, a few psukim later, the Nach state, you will cross over the Yarden into Eretz Yisrael, and the Eibusher will give you peace from your enemies. And then, Shemai, that is, or Sham, yeah. Shama taviu es kol hashanochim etzav gomer. There you should bring all your karbanis. So it repeats it again. So what's this repetition? It is Mevayir in Sifri, and Rashi brings this b'pirush el ha-Torah. So in Sifri it explains, and Rashi quotes this, as the Resh, the pasuk is Amor le'inyan Shiloi. When it says that the first time v'haveisem shamai l'seichem is referring to Mishkan Shiloi. Und the zweite Amor le'inyan Yerushalayim. And the second time, when it says that Shama taviu es kol hashanochim mitzaveh, that's referring to Yerushalayim. That's the repetition. But now, it's not only that the Torah repeats it twice, because once Shiloi and once Yerushalayim, if you pay close attention to the wording in the pasuk here, there are additional differences. Zetman noch achiluk in the psukim. So we see in the language of the psukim here additional differences. In the Merishtim pasuk is the Aschala Hadgasha often mentioned. The beginning, the opening of the pasuk, and the emphasis is talking about the person dem gavra. V'haveisem shama ilasechem gomer. It's saying where you should bring. You have karbanas to bring. Where should you bring your karbanas? So there's a place designated for that. That's how it describes it here. Masha'enken in zweiten pasuk, but on the second pasuk is the aschala adgashe of the makom. The opening and the emphasis is more regarding the actual place. That there's a place. Shama taviyas kol hashanochim mitzav eschem. There is a place, and there in this place you should bring your karbanas there. But it's not. It doesn't open talking to the person about the karbanis that he has to bring. It talks first about the place, and then it says, in this place you should bring. What's the difference? This is connected to a general difference between the psukim that describe first Mishkan Shila and then later the Mikdash Yerushalayim. And he asked the psukim, hoipt on the Teire mit den Isser. If you look in the first psukim, it starts off right away with the fact that the Eibusha says it's forbidden leisasen kein l'shem lekeichem lahakte l'shamayim b'chol makim. The Isser of not bringing a carbon anywhere else. Und wie hemshech und Tetzah von dem Isser kommt der Chiyuv. And then, as a continuation and as an outcome of this Isser, comes the positive aspect or the mitzvah, ki im el hamakom gomer. Only where should you bring the carbon? Only in this place that I designate to you. This meant, as in the inyan b'chire b'makim yuchad zeh, the fact that the Eibishter is choosing, the Eibishter Take is choosing a designated place, is mudgish, but in the pasuk it's emphasized as the mit vert bavarent dem iser from makriv zayin karbonis b'chol makim. The main point here of why Hashem is choosing this place is for the purpose of making sure now, or designating a place that you will not be able to bring a carbon anywhere else, nor blazing ein art. It's to single out one place that it's here. Here's where Hashem wants you to bring the karbanis. That's the point of the Bechira, the way the pasuk describes it here. Mashenkin in the second pasuk is das chale mitten chiv, but in the second pasuk, the pasuk starts right away with the positive, with what this place is. That the Eibush is choosing this place. V'hoya makim, without talking first about the karbanis and that it should not be brought elsewhere. Going right away and saying, "V'hoya makim asher yivcha Hashem lekechem bo l'shakin shmoi sham," the place that Hashem chooses that He dwells there, shama taviu. Was das heißt? What does it mean? That adarabah, here it's the opposite. As the shama taviu, the fact that you bring your karbanis only here is that tetzah defun. Was das is the makim asher yivcha Hashem lekechem bo, because it's the place that Hashem chose. So this is the place. It's a place for what? It's a place where the Eibishter is. It's a place that the Eibishter chose. Since it's the place where the Eibishter chose, therefore, this is the place where you bring the karbanis. It's not because of bavarening, making sure that you're not going to bring anywhere else, and there should be only one place where everyone comes. But no, the pasuk starts off with the positive. This is the place. So what comes out from this? There's a fundamental difference here between the Bechira and Shiloi and the Bechira and Yerushalayim. The fun is move on. So what we understand from this is, as Chanami. Yes, it's true. Oich by Shiloi is given the inyan bechira. The Eibishter chose Shiloi as a place, a makim. Aber in dem Teichen bechira is a chiluk ikri zwischen Shiloi and Yerushalayim. But in the content of what this bechira is about, what its purpose is completely different when it's in Shiloi and Yerushalayim. By Shiloi is given the bechira in the makim. By Shiloi, when the Eibishter chooses this place, so yeah, the Eibishter Take is choosing this one designated place, but it's not blois v'yat teitzah from dem Isser lahakta l'shamayim b'chol makim. It's an outcome of the fact that since there's an Issa to bring anywhere else, so therefore there must be a designated place to bring the karbanis. So the Eibishter Take is designating and choosing this place. So there is a real bechira in a positive sense that here, this is the place, but it's for a certain purpose, in order that karbanis should only be brought in one place and not elsewhere. But on the other hand, Yerushalayim, the level of Bechira is much deeper. Is das der Ort, wo der Eibishter hat Beiche gewinnt, nicht mitzad hatam. Here, the Bechira in this place is not because of accomplishing anything, any reason, any purpose, nor as das soll sein, Mokai Mashrosh Chinasi Yisbarach. It's a place which the Eibishter chooses without any reason that this is the place where the Shechina dwells. But then, Ubimela, automatically, as a result of the fact that this is where the Shechina is das oich der Makkah wo es darf sein, a kravas karbanis. So this is also the place where you bring the karbanis, shama taviyah. This is where the karbanis are brought. But what's the starting point? The starting point is a bechira be'etzem. Hashem chooses, this is my place. So this is the place where you bring the karbanis. B'signa nachher, to put this in a different way. The bechira in Shiloi is given salib Yidden. When the Eibishter chooses Shiloi, why is he choosing this place? It's for the sake of Yidden. So they didn't have one designated place that they know they can come there, and this is available. This is the place that's designated and special for this to bring karbanis. This is given free, and not just scattered all over to bring karbanis anywhere like it was before. Heter abamis, when anyone can bring a carbon on his bama where he wishes. Mashenkein, the bechira in Yerushalayim is given mitzadem Eibishter kaviyachol, but the bechira in Yerushalayim is the Eibishter. The Eibishter from his behalf decides that as hu yizbarach had kaviyachol beiche gewen an art l'shchinasai. The Eibishter chooses a place where the Shechina will dwell. Zais menuchasi adeyad. This is my dwelling. This is my place of rest forever. That's the Bechira in Yerushalayim. So it's a completely different level of Bechira. Now here in Sifav, the Rabbi continues and explains that the difference between the Bechira, it's not only as far as the depth of the Bechira and the source from where it comes from, if there's a reason or there's no reason and so on, but there's also a real difference in how this affects the place that's actually chosen. The Inyan HaNivcha. Let's see. Mitzad, im Unterschied in dem Öfen HaBechira zwischen Shilo und Yerushalayim, because of this difference in how the Bechira is, what the nature of the Bechira is, and the difference between Shilo and Yerushalayim is Oich Farana Chiluk B'Shayches dem Inyan HaNivcha. There's also a difference in the Bechira in connection to what is being chosen here. What exactly is it that's being chosen? And the difference is as follows. When it comes to Shiloi, so there was a point to this Bechira. What's the point? That there should be a designated place for Karbanis. Wert is bavarent, es is genug, when the Bechira is in them Mokken. So that's taken care of, and it's sufficient that you have a place that's chosen, that this is the place, Mokken HaBayis, this is the place of where the Bayis will be built. Aber nit in dem Bayis shenivna Allah. But the actual structure, the Mishkan Shil that was built on this place, there's no Bechira of the Eibishter and the Bayis that's built on this place. The Bechira is for the designation of one place for the purpose of Karbanis. That doesn't include the Bayis itself. Mashenkem b'Yerushalayim, which is not so when it comes to Yerushalayim, is das Bechira mitzad atzma. In Yerushalayim, over here, this is the real concept of Bechira, where the Eibishter just chooses because he wants to be here. He's saying that he's going to dwell here. On a tama magbul in the minyan. There is no point or reason or purpose that limits what the Bechira is pertaining to. Is das kailo side the mokem abayis and side and bias. So therefore the Bechira in Yerushalayim is complete. It's a Bechira in the place, and it's also a Bechira in the bias that's built on this place. On the contrary, not only is it also including the bias, but that's actually one of the main points here. Since this is a place that the Eibishter, the Shechina, chooses for his peace to rest here forever, is move on as the menucha bepoil werd durch den Bayis. Where does the Eibishter dwell? Where does he rest? In the home. In the Bayis that's built here. The Bayis Gufa is a Beis HaBechira. So therefore the Eibishter chooses the actual Bayis built on this location here on Har HaMiriah in Yerushalayim. It's not just a place that's being chosen for Karbanis, but it's a dwelling for the Shechina. So that includes the Bayis as well. Right, so really what the Rebbe is saying over here is that it's a completely different type of Bechira. It's real Bechira. The Eibishter is choosing this place and he wants to be here. And that is expressed Be'ikir in the Bayis. As far as the Mokim is concerned, so the Mokim could be used for something, it could be used for the Karbanis or not for the Karbanis, or the Eibishter wants to be here. And in Shiloh, there was a Bechira in the Mokim. But when the Eibishter chooses the Bayis in addition to the Mokim, the Bayis expresses dafka the emissayin of Bechira, that the Eibishter wants to be here. And that aspect he did not have in Shiloh. And therefore by Shiloh, not only was there no Bechira in the Mokim, again, not only was there no Bechira in the Bayis, but even the Bechira in the Mokim of Shiloh is not the real concept of Bechira that Eibishter chooses. Here's where I want to be. It's Bechira with a certain purpose in mind, that the Yidden should be able to come here to bring their Karbanis. Was das ist eigentlich mudgish in the Shinuya al-Shainis and the Psukim Anal. So this is all also emphasized in the different language that we see in the Psukim that we quoted before in our parsha. The redundancy in the Psukim where it talks about the place that the Eibishter chose for Yidden when it says it the first time regarding Mishkan Shiloh and the second time regarding the Mikdash in Yerushalayim. So here the Rebbe points out additional diyukim in the difference in the lashon of the pasuk more than what the Rebbe said before. B'negei zu Shiloh sagt dem pasuk hamakom eshivcha Hashem lekecha gomer lasum es shmoi sham. So here the pasuk says that what's the nature of the Bechira by Shiloh, that the Eibishter chooses this place to put his Shechina there. So the Rebbe is being medayik the words of Lasam and Sham. Aber b'shayches Yerushalayim is the Lashon HaKosav asher yivcha Hashem lekecha boy l'shakin shmoi sham. The Eibishter chooses it to dwell there. So it says boy, that's all. What's the difference? By Shiloh is the Bechira nit boy. in the Mokim. By Shiloi, the Dava HaNivchar, what's being chosen here, the Eibush doesn't choose it for what it is, that this is it, this is where the Eibush wants to be, in them Mokim. Nor in Lasum as Shemai. The Eibush chooses to place his name there. The Eibush's name could be placed here, could be placed there, and the Eibush chooses it for a certain purpose to be here. Lasum is mashma that it's being placed here, but not that this is it. When you say Lasum, it can be placed here, it can be placed somewhere else. The Eibush decides to place here, to put over here. That's not a bechira and a makom, which is a bechira be'etzem, in this place. Hashenkin by Yerushalayim is the Yivchar Hashem Elokecha boy. In the makom, the Eibush chooses be'etzem. This is the place without any purpose, without any reason that we're accomplishing, but the Eibush wants it, this place itself. So here we could see in the Lashonos of the Psukim when it talks about the Inyan HaNivchar, what's being chosen, that the Torah changes the Lashon. Auf dieses verstandig, was the Rambam ruft, the halachis, hilchis, beis habechira. With this we can understand why the Rambam, when it comes to hilchis beis habechira, he gives it this title. He calls the halachis of all the details about the building the Beis HaMikdash, he calls them hilchis beis habechira. Now the question is, Chotsch as in das Chala, kaiseres von hilchis beis habechira, wo es werden ausgerechnet die mitzvahs, welche sind in die halachis, when it comes to the title, before hilchis beis habechira, where the Rambam enumerates the mitzvahs that are going to be explained here in these halachas. Zog the Rambam as the erste mitzvah is livnois Beis HaMikdash. So there the Rambam refers to the Beis HaMikdash as the term that we usually use, which is Beis HaMikdash. Or nid Beis HaBechira. Doesn't use the term Beis HaBechira. Another thing, Val derech zijn die halachas gufa. Here in these halachas, gleich in the erste halacha bringt the pasuk Vasuli Mikdash. The pasuk in the Torah says Mikdash. Und nicht den pasuk, and he doesn't quote a pasuk where steht the lashon from Bechira. Doesn't quote any of the psukim where it uses the term Bechira. Nachmer, third point. Die weite de galachas beschachas und Beis HaMikdash ruft taka mit dem Namen Mikdash. The halachas later that Rambam refers to with the term Mikdash. Other halachas that are related to the Beis HaMikdash. There are the halachas of Klei HaMikdash and the halachas of Bias Mikdash. So why here does the Rambam refer to these halachas as the Hilchas Beis HaBechira? The answer is because it's only this title of Beis HaBechira that expresses what's unique about the Beis HaBechira in Yerushalayim, as opposed to all the other places that it was. The mit is mudgish, as the Iker Chiddush in the Beis HaMikdash, Yerushalayim, Beis Elamim, is Bechiras HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is the only thing that's unique about this place here, that it's called Beis HaBechira, that the Eibush chooses this place, Bechiras HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Alright, so was das dikt zechais? Now the hadgash here is not only on the word bechiras or bechira, but it's also the base of bechira. But was das dikt zechais? Euch in them was euch the bias is a base of bechira. So the fact that this is a real choice, that the Eibush chooses it be'etzem, and not a choice for a certain purpose, not the emes inyan of bechira. The emes inyan of bechira, the Eibush chooses it be'etzem. Where is that expressed? In the dafke and the bias, as I've explained before. By Shiloi, the bechira was for a purpose, for the karbanas to be brought in one place. So there the bechira is just in the makkah, not in the bias. But in the Beis HaMikdash, where it's for the Eibishter to dwell there, that's the Eibishter's choosing. Batson, this is where he wants to be. So that's expressed dafke where the Eibishter dwells b'poil, which is in the bias. So hence the Lashon Beis HaBechira expresses perfectly what is unique about the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim as opposed to Mishkan Shilei before, or any other aspect of whatever there is by the other Bate Mikdashes before. So based on all of this, and the Lashon Rambam, we could also explain what the Rambam says in Hilchas Beis HaBechira in Halacha Gimel. Kivin shenivne hamikdash b'Yerushalayim. Once the Beis HaMikdash was built in Yerushalayim, Nesr kol hamakoyim is kulon livnis b'hem bayis l'Hashem chulu. So now it became forbidden to bring a carbon in any other place, or actually the Rambam says here that the Isser is to build a bias in any other place. That's what the Rambam here says. Not a 47 that Rebbe adds, that later on the Rambam adds Ula Hakriv Ben carbon, which is the Isser to bring a carbon in any other place. But what the Rebbe is quoting inside the Sikh is that once the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim is built, you may not build a bias in any other place. The L'chayre, so seemingly the question is, as the Ekeroif to in Beis Elamim is the Inyan HaBechira, as we have just explained. What's the main accomplishment of the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim? It's forever because Eibush chooses this place. Hat der Rambam gedacht sagen, Kim nifchar Beis Elamim. That once the Beis Elamim was chosen, that's the main point there. Nachmer, in Mechilte steht Taka Zoy de Loshen. In Mechilte, Taka uses this language. Actually nifchara Yerushalayim and or actually nifchar Beis Elamim chulu. So it uses the term nifchara. that once it was chosen, so this is the place. Und der Rambam is Mishane von Lashon HaMechilte und sagt, Kivin she'nivna mikdash. The Rambam changes the Lashon and he says that once the Beis HaMikdash is built, why is that Rambam doing this? Based on what we said before, we can say as follows. As the Zenefada Tzvei Paratim in the Bechire B'Mikdash B'Yerushalayim. That there are really two different details in the choice of the Eibishter in the Mikdash in Yerushalayim, Yederer in Zayin Zman. And these two details of the Bechire in this Beis HaMikdash is in two different time periods. The Bechire B'Mokem HaMikdash, Shebahara Meria, was das is given Mimei Avis. The fact that the Eibishter chose this place, the place of Hara Meria, that will be the ultimate place where the Yidden are going to build a Beis HaMikdash, that was already from the times of the Avis. Was the Far is das given the Mokem Shebana by Avram HaMizbeach v'Akadol of Yitzchak. This is the place where Avram built the Mizbeach and the Akedah took place there. V'Hu HaMokem Shebana by Noach Chulu, and even earlier Noach built a Mizbeach there. The Rambam is Bavayir in Perik Beis, as the Rambam brings in the beginning of the second Perik of Hilchos Beis HaBechira. That's that aspect of Bechira. But then there's another Bechira. On the Bechire in them bias gufe, but then the deeper level of Bechire, as Rabbi explained, the Bechire be'etzem that Eibishter chose this place, and the bias which is expressed, the fact that Eibishter chooses this dwelling in the home, was das hat sich aufgetan, when nivne hamikdash b'Yerushalayim. That Bechire was only when the Beis HaMikdash was actually built there. Und demalt ist euch nicht teisuf geworden, die Schleimes HaBechire, euch von der Mokken. So then, the Bechire, the true concept of Bechire, that Eibishter is choosing this place because of this place, not because of any purpose. The Eibishter wants to be here. That's expressed now even in the Mokkim itself. Because the Far is Daf Gedan, Nesr, Kolam Bekaimis, Kolam Livnois, Be'en, Bayis Lashem. And this is the reason why, and it's from then that you're not allowed to build a bayis in any other place. So it's this. So therefore, the Rambam says nivne. It's dafka the nivne. When the actual bias is built, that's when the second aspect of the real bechire is here in this house. Damit is euch muvur for was the Rambam bringt of them rayas from the psukim. This explains also why when the Rambam brings proof for this, what are the psukim that he brings? So the Rambam here brings the psukim vayem David zehu beis Hashem elikim v'zem mizbeach la'olah Yisrael. This is the house for the Eibishter. This is the mizbeach for the oil for Yidden. Was das bringt is wie the Bechire is nicht nur in Mokem HaMikdash, nor euch in the Bayis Gufe. The Rambam here is bringing this dafka, this pasuk that mentions the Bayis, to point out that it's not only that the Eibishter chooses the place, which that Bechire was already earlier on, but that the Bechire wasn't the actual Bayis, which is a completely different level of a Bechire. That's the Rambam is quoting dafka these psukim and not the psukim that are brought in the Gemara. And then the Rambam actually adds another pasuk, Zois menuchasi adeyad, that this is my menucha forever. Was in dem zweiten pasuk is Musbe the tam of them was the Bechire is euch Bayis. The second pasuk gives an explanation. Why is the Bechire not only in the Makkah, but the Bechire is in the actual Bayis itself? Hayes, as the Rebbe started by given the Mart Nitzlibad Atam, the Tafkid, Miyuchad, Makim Lakrave, since the Bechire here is not for a reason or any particular purpose. There should be a place to bring karbanis. Not als Zois Muruchasi. Adeya. This is where the Eibishter dwells. This is where the Eibishter rests. Is b'meila the Bechire in the Bayis Gufa. That's the reason why there's a Bechire in this Bayis, and that's the source of the Isser of building any other Bayis. So, but before this, there was no Bechire in the Bayis yet. There was a Bechire in the Makkah. So the Rambam is bringing dafke this aspect of the Bechire, the later stage, the new aspect of Bechire. That's only when the Bayis was built. According to this, here the Rebbe comes back to the psukim in the parsha, the difference between the psukim that speak about the place of Mishkan Shiloh being chosen to bring the karbanas dafka there, and the psukim that speak about the Mokim Hamikdash in Yerushalayim, that the psukim that the carbon should be brought dafka there. So now I move on the Chelek canal Siv Daled. With this, we could also understand the difference. When it comes to Mishkan Shiloh, so there the pasuk says Va'avesem. It highlights it's the person that's bringing the carbon, that he should bring it there. It begins with the obligation the person has on das brengt as es is da ashama. And because there is a chiv on the person to bring it to a particular place, so the Eibishter designates a place where that should be. On by Yerushalayim is das chole shama. There's a place. There's a there. Taviyu, and that's where b'meila dafa inzayin the taviyu, and that's where you have to bring the karbanos. This is the chiluk that the Rebbe pointed out before in Siv Daled. Right, so the Rebbe explained based on this the difference in the nature of the bechira But now the Rebbe, based on all this, brings it back also to understanding the difference, how this applies to the actual obligation to bring the carbon only in one place and not anywhere else. That there's a difference in the geder of that chiyuv, based on the difference in the lashonos of the psukim here. The chiyuv to makriv zayin karbanis b'shiloi davke, the obligation to bring the karbanis only in shiloi bizman mishkan shiloi, when the mishkan was up there, is chiyuv gavra. This is a chiyuv that lies upon the yidden, on the person. Since Yidden are commanded to bring karbanis. Und danach ist zugekommen in dem Chiyuv, as es soll sein in Amakim Yuchot. And then, the Eibishter adds additionally that those karbanis should be brought in a specific, designated place. Hat der Eibishter für sie ausgeklippen, Mishkan, Shiloi, als der Makom HaKrava. So, there has to be a place, so the Eibishter chooses where that place is going to be. But it's really all about the karbanis. The karbanis that the Yidden have to bring, the Gavra, they have to bring karbanis, and there's a specific place, so the Eibishter designates that place. Und bedafke has to be dafke here in this place, as vet chalev zei a iser to makriv zayin mechutz l'shiloi. So this negates now. There's also a shlila that they're not allowed to bring it anywhere else. Mashen can be Yerushalayim, but when it comes to Yerushalayim, was der inyan abchire is mitzad atzma. In Yerushalayim, as was explained by Riches here, the bchire Yerushalayim is not based on anything. It's the Eibishter choosing this place for him. Und in Cheftze, in Embayis, the Eibishter chooses not just a place, but a object. The Eibishter chooses the actual bayis, Beis HaBechira. This is the Eibishter's home where he dwells. Is Yeshloima, so we could say that this also shows you what's the pshat now in this, that you didn't have to bring karbanis dafke there. As the mitzvahs hakrove darten, the fact that you didn't have to bring the carbon there, lahakriv kol karbanis bebeis habechira, that all karbanis should be brought in the Beis Hamikdash, in the Beis Habechira. So it's not only like the Rebbe said before that it's mitzad of gavri. You have to bring karbanis. Where are you going to bring them? The Eibishter designates for you a place because he wants you to bring it in one place. No, it is oich mitzadem cheftze from carbon. The very object of the carbon itself demands that it should be brought in this place. What's the pshat in this? What's the reason for this? So the reason for this, the Hezber comes in the last paragraph of the Sikha, as we'll see in a moment, but in between, the Rebbe says that with this pshat, that this halacha, that the carbon has to be brought in this place, is not only for the gavra to have a place where to bring it, but the actual cheftza of the carbon has to be brought dafke in this place. It's connected, it must be dafke here. So we can understand the lashon of the Rambam regarding this later, when the Rambam talks about this in the halachas of karbanis, not only in Hovir and Hilchas Beis Habchira, but in Hilchas Maisar karbanis. Al Pizay Yom Tak the lashon Rambam in Sefer Hayad by the mitzvahs hakrava bebeis Habchira. When the Rambam talks about the fact that the karbanis should be brought only in the Beis Habchira and the Beis Hamikdash. Where Haiptan the halachas nit mit the chiv adam. The Rambam does not begin the halachas with the obligation that lies upon a person to bring karbanis, and that the karbanis should be brought in a particular place. To say as follows: mitzvah sasei lahakriv kol karbanis bebeis habchira. That there's a mitzvah sasei to bring karbanis, and where? In the Beis Habchira. That's not how the Rambam puts it. Nor meet the karbanis. The Rambam actually starts right at the beginning. He starts with the karbanis themselves, the cheftz of the karbanis. Kol karbanis kulam chulu. All of the karbanis mitzvahs asay lahakrivan the Beis Habchira. The mitzvah is that they should be brought in the Beis Habchira. So what do you see from this lashon? Was the phone is mashma. So from this it seems as the chiyuv to makriv and the karbanis dafke darten, that obligation to bring the karbanis specifically in the Beis Hamikdash is not atnai in oifen hakrave mitzad makriv gavra. It's not just a condition as far as the person fulfilling his chiyuv of bringing the carbon. He has a chiyuv to bring a carbon, and then there's another condition on location where it should be. Not oich mitzad the karbanis cheftze. It's the karbanis itself that demand that they belong to be here. That's where the karbanis belong. They're connected. They should be in this place. That's what the Rambam is saying. Mitzvah say, kol karbanis kulon mitzvah say lakrivam. This is the place of the karbanis. Now, what's the hezber? Why is this connected to the concept of bechira that there is in Yerushalayim, which is a bechira be'etzem in the cheftz of the place itself? Yeshloima adosas mitzadem tam anal. So these two things are connected. Vibal, das ist da a bias or a base abechire a mokke mashchine, because the Eibishter chooses this place. This is the Eibishter's place. This is the place of the Shchine. Brengt es euch a chiyuv auf der Cheftze von the karbanis, as man darf sie makriv sein in dem bias. If since this is the place of the Shchine where the Eibishter is be'etzem, so that's where karbanis belong to be. Not only mitzad the fact that we have one place which is designated, shouldn't be bringing it all over the place. There's one designated place. On Mamela, the chi of gavra that you have, so the Eibishter says you fulfill that condition of bringing it in one place here. No, it works the other way around. This is where the Eibishter is. If this is where the Eibishter is, so mitzad the chefetz of the carbon. What's a carbon? A carbon is being brought for the Eibishter. Where does a carbon belong to be? In the place where the Eibishter is. So therefore, the halacha of the carbon being brought is mitzad the chefetz.